There's nothing like the smell of fresh baked bread. Today, I'm going to show you one of my favorite recipes to make for Easter. What I've done is combine a traditional Scandinavian sweetbread with an egg bread that's common in especially the Greek and Italian cultures. And a braided bread is something that is common in Scandinavia and is very similar to a Jewish challah bread. I do like to use my bread machine a lot because it's quick and easy and if I'm busy and it's kind of strapped for time, but I really do enjoy kneading and letting the bread rise. This recipe is great because you can make it all by hand, but if you have a stand mixer, you can kind of make it easier on yourself and do some of the steps in the stand mixer. To get started, I'm going to melt some butter in milk and sugar on the stove. So I'm going to start with a stick of butter. And to that, I'm going to add 2 cups of milk and 2/3 of a cup of sugar. Whisk that a little bit and then put it on the stove just until the butter melts. Now that my butter is melted, I'm going to add my yeast. Just sprinkle it right over the top. I let it cool down a bit. You don't want to kill your yeast, so you just want it to be warm, not really hot off the stove. And this is 2 packets, which is about 2 tablespoons of yeast. Just pour that right over the top. Then I'm just going to kind of whisk that in and let it sit for about 5 minutes until the yeast starts to get foamy. I have 6 cups of all-purpose flour in this bowl and 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt. To that, I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of cardamom. All kinds of Scandinavian baked goods use it. It has a really unique smell and it just adds this kind of like warmth to any baked goods that you make. I'm just gonna kind of combine this a little bit. Now that my dough is ready, I'm going to oil a bowl so it doesn't stick, and this is what it's going to rise in. You can use olive oil or vegetable oil. I like to use walnut oil just because it kind of gives it a little bit of a different taste. I don't really want an olive oil tasting sweetbread, but really any oil will work just so your bread doesn't stick. I'm just gonna put a light coating on my big bowl. Now that my yeast is foamy and ready to go, I'm going to start adding ingredients to the mixer. I'm going to first crack 1 egg into the mixer bowl. I like to do the egg first in case any shell gets into it. I can pull it out before I've added my other ingredients. Save the egg shell for your chickens. And then I'm going to pour in my yeast right into the bowl. That nice foamy yeast. And then I'm going to put it on low and start adding my flour mixture. Maybe, I don't know, 1/2 cup at a time. And just make sure it gets all mixed in there. And I'm just gonna keep adding my flour mixture a little bit at a time, making sure that each batch is all mixed in before I add more. I'm just gonna stop it for a second and scrape down the side. I've mixed in all my flour and I'm just gonna let it go until it forms a nice cohesive ball. If it is still sticky, you can add flour another tablespoon at a time, just until it makes a nice dough. I'm just going to take that out and then just put my dough into my oiled bowl. And I'm just going to cover it with plastic wrap and put it in a warm spot. I think I'm gonna put it right next to the wood stove because it's nice and warm there. And I'll let this sit for 1/2 an hour till it's about double in size. While the bread is rising, I'm going to just wash some eggs so I can tuck them into the bread to make it a really pretty Easter bread. I generally don't wash my eggs until just before using them. They're laid with an invisible coating called the bloom that keeps out air and bacteria. That way they don't have to be refrigerated. As long as they're not washed, you don't have to refrigerate them. But before using them, you do want to rinse them under warm water. You don't want them sitting in water, so I do put them in a colander and just let the warm water run over them and use my fingers to clean off any mud. Since it is mud season, they do kind of get dirty. So this time of year, I do end up washing them and I just use them right away or refrigerate them. Okay, it's been about 1/2 an hour and the dough is looking beautiful. It easily doubled in size. So now I'm just going to punch it down and knead it for about a minute or 2. I'm just gonna put some flour down here so it doesn't stick, a little bit on my hand. And take my smells so good. This is really the only kneading you need to do for this dough. As I mentioned, if you don't want to do it in the stand mixer, you can make the dough entirely by hand, but that first part in the stand mixer makes it so much easier. Okay, this recipe actually makes 2 braids. You will have one for yourself and one to bring to an Easter brunch or if you're going somewhere for the holiday. So what you want to do is separate the dough in half, and then each half you're going to separate into 3 equal sections. Then I just want to roll each section out into a long rope, about 12 or 14 inches long. So now I've got my 3 ropes and I'm going to braid them on my parchment covered baking sheet. And then starting at one end, just start braiding. And then I kind of pinch the ends together and tuck them underneath. It's easier if you wait till the end to do the top, once you have it all braided. And that looks good, and I'm just gonna set this aside to rise for another 30 minutes. So the bread is looking great. It's gone through its 2nd rise, and at this point I have a traditional Swedish sweetbread. I'm gonna steal a little something from the Greeks or the Italians, and I'm gonna tuck some eggs into this bread and make it a super fun Easter egg bread. I'm using my own eggs because we have all different colors. You don't need to cook the eggs because they're going to cook as the bread bakes. So I'm just going to take some eggs and sort of pull the braid apart a little bit and tuck them in. For this size braid, I think about 5 eggs is a good number. You'll have enough room for the 5. Just alternating colors. Whisk a tablespoon of milk with an egg to make an egg wash for the top. And I'm just going to brush the bread. I don't want to brush the eggs with this egg wash, but this will give the bread a really nice golden brown color on top. It also gives the sprinkles something to stick to. Traditionally, you would sprinkle the bread with Swedish pearl sugar, which is sort of like a coarse white sugar, but since we're making an Easter bread, I'm gonna use colored sprinkles because it's just gonna make it that much more festive. And then just lastly, I'm going to brush the eggs with a little bit of walnut oil, and again, you can use olive oil or vegetable oil. I just happen to like the walnut oil because it gives it a little bit different taste. And that looks beautiful. Now I'm going to put it in the oven at 375 degrees for about 20 minutes. It will brown pretty quickly on the top, so you do kind of want to watch it. My bread is done. It smells so good and it's gonna taste delicious. I can't wait to cut into it and enjoy a piece with a cup of coffee. I love this fun twist on a traditional braided bread. Tucking the eggs in just makes it perfect for Easter. I'm gonna slice it so everybody gets a little bit of bread and a cooked egg in their slice. For more egg recipes, visit fresheggsdaily.com.